Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the OSBA virtual town hall with our focus on vaccinations for our staff in our districts. Well, good evening, my friend, Mr. Bobo.
Good evening, Dr. McFarland. It's good to see you, and it's good to be back in 2021.
It is good to be back. I feel like it's been a while since we've had a town hall, but we
Yeah.
definitely have a good topic to explore tonight and some really great experts that have joined us.
It's amazing. We normally, when we have our town halls, we have a section called Hot Topics. I think this is the hottest topic that's going right now. So it's great that we're able to get together.
Yeah, definitely it is. You know, Mark, one of the things that I keep getting information on is hands down across the nation, experts agree our children need to be back into schools for lots and lots of different reasons, but it's how to bring them back into school and how to protect our staff to make sure that everybody is healthy in this transition of getting them back into school. So we're excited. We have lots of questions that our members have been asking, everything from can you mandate your staff to take the vaccine for COVID? How do we get our staff to be covered? What do we do with the classrooms while they're out getting their vaccinations? How many vaccinations are available in the state of Ohio? What does that timeline look like? So what we're going to do tonight with our really great host of experts is try to make sure that we answer everyone's questions. So Mark, why don't you explain to everybody what the rules of the game are?
So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We're glad to have each of you here, and we're excited about the robust conversation that will be coming forth. As Kathy said, we have some experts, great information for you here tonight. But as always, our time together is supposed to be interactive. So we welcome you to put your questions in the chat box. We are making every effort, Kathy and I, to manage that chat box as we have the discussion tonight to make sure that all the questions are answered during our time together. If we don't get to your questions, we have committed to make sure that we will follow up with you to make sure you get your question answered. And also remember that tonight's session is being recorded. So we have the opportunity to revisit this at a later time. We just want to make sure that you have the best information possible. So Kathy, we're excited to get things started, and I'll put it back in your hands.
Yeah, thanks. And so we're going to kick off this evening with one of the greatest people that we can have, which is our OSBA president, Scott Huddle, who's going to get us out of the gate. Scott?
Kathy, thank you very much. As OSBA president, on behalf of the entire OSBA leadership team, it's my distinct privilege to welcome each of you to today's town hall. We trust you will find today's discussion robust, informative, and educational as we work collectively to return our students back and staff back to in-person learning. OSBA stands ready to support our members with information and guidance as we continue the process of returning back to the classroom setting. And I just want you to know we're going to be there for you every step of the way. Once again, welcome to today's town hall, and it's my distinct privilege to introduce Rick Lewis, OSBA CEO and Executive Director. Rick.
Thank you, President Huddle. We're going to get right into the program, and probably our first speaker needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. And that's Dr. John Richard, Ohio's Deputy State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Many of you know John, but for those who don't, John comes to us with a wealth of experience. He has more than 10 years of experience as a part-time instructor up at the University of Akron and their school principalship program. But before that, he was one of you. He spent 30 years in the field, ranging from classroom teacher to the district superintendent. And this is actually, I believe, John, your second tour of duty down at ODE. Back in 2013 to 2015, John was a senior executive director and associate superintendent for the department. And it was in that role where he reviewed and led the review and revisions of Ohio's operating standards. And then before coming back to the department, John served as the Associate Executive Director of the Ohio Association of Secondary School Administrators, where he oversaw professional development for high school principals. Now John serves in a new role. He works closely with the 4 primary program centers of the Ohio Department of Education. And perhaps more importantly, he is a great outreach. He works with stakeholders from around the state of Ohio. John has been invaluable to OSBA, keeping us up to speed throughout this process. He was an architect of the Restart program. And I can tell you just from personal experience, he's been a great friend to OSBA, giving school board members a voice at the table, listening to your concerns, making certain they were addressed, and then keeping us apprised every step along the way about the changes. As you know, we're living in a very dynamic world, and today is a lot different than the world we lived in yesterday, and won't be the same as the one we're going to see tomorrow. And it's people like John who are helping us navigate those rapids. So we're going to get right to it. We've asked John to participate for two reasons. Well, actually, our panel today has a couple of different perspectives. John is going to come to us and talk about the 10,000-foot view on how this whole process is working, the department's role, advice we've received from the governor's administration, and then we'll be turning it over to a more boots on the ground perspective from the ESCs. But we're going to ask John to just dive right in. And Dr. Richard, if you can talk to us a little bit about what lies ahead and what can school boards, superintendents, administrators, and staff expect in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the kind words, Rick. It's a pleasure to be able to do this this afternoon or early evening. And I always love being in any type of meeting like this where we're able to hopefully bring a little bit of clarity around what's happening currently. We know that at this particular time, vaccines are on everybody's mind. And I think since mid-March of 2020, we realized very early on that we were going to have to be extremely flexible and be willing to change whether we wanted to or not. We were going to have to be extremely nimble, kind of agile in that. And as a result, that we would have to be ready to kind of pivot, to change from offense to defense, or whatever analogy you like to use, very, very quickly. And so that has occurred as the pandemic has kind of taken a life of its own at times, and then resulting in a lot of different, in some cases, mandates, others recommendations, and so forth. And so we work very closely with the governor's office, and we work very closely with Ohio's Department of Health. And the one thing I will say up front as a disclaimer is myself nor Randy Lucas are health experts. We are school experts. We do that for a living. Neither of us were trained in vaccine rollout or vaccine information or anything else, but we both find ourselves kind of in that role these days. And so we will do our best to answer your questions because we are working with the other two entities pretty closely. And so a little bit of context setting first of all, and then I'll get into kind of exactly where we're at. As we know it today, some of that will change probably yet this evening and even tomorrow as more information becomes available. If for those of you, I decided not to do any kind of slide deck, but if I were, I would start out with the plane that is kind of half built as it's flying, or crossing the bridge as you're building the bridge. That is where we're at with the vaccine rollout. We are, getting information literally daily from both the governor's office and the Department of Health as this does roll out. And to get us prepped for this, as the vaccines started coming into Ohio, and those healthcare workers in the 1A group with the nursing homes and so forth began receiving their vaccines, the governor made the decision that school personnel would be in that 1B group because of the importance of getting students back into classrooms as much as possible. And so that is where the kind of rollout came from. Of course, that was a decision with probably 20 other groups or more who thought they should be in that second group. And so certainly from an educator's perspective, I respect the focus on our children and on ultimately getting our staff back in a place where it's safer to be with our children. And so that came because there were so many groups competing. Of course, the governor made the decision to ask for a commitment from school districts and from schools to be back in the classroom in one format of in-person or hybrid by March 1st. And so he has made that point obviously several times. And so that was kind of a first step in this, is to get a handle on how many districts were going to commit to that, and then by doing so, allowing their staff, their employees to kind of jump in line in front of a lot of other groups who thought they should be there. So that was kind of step one. From there, things started taking off very, very quickly. And so as a result of that, kind of fast forward to today, we have had every district in the state of Ohio, with one exception actually, did commit to that. So those staff members in those schools are all in line over the next 4 weeks to be vaccinated. I will just pause there for a moment. And on that commitment form and the intention of those being vaccinated are school employees, basically anybody who is essential on a day-to-day basis for the schools operating. So that's teachers, coaches, secretaries, basically anybody you can name. It is not intended, just to be clear, and I will say this up front, it is not intended for board members. That is not the intent behind it. I think from what I'm hearing here and there have been exceptions made to that at the local level. That is not something that's intended for that. But just as in many cases, we don't have direct control over what does happen in specific communities, and we are not out there policing this. But what I do want to say, if that's a question of yours, is that this kind of happened with the healthcare workers, where some of the board members or administrators kind of jumped in line in front of nurses, and there was quite a bit of criticism for that. And we certainly would not want you to be in that position as well. This is really intended so our kids can be back in classrooms, and our staff and our employees feel safe with that happening. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there in front of everybody. How this has rolled out, and again, none of us went to school and learned how to roll out a vaccine for over 300,000 employees across the state, but that's kind of where we find ourselves now. And so over 4 weeks, our staff from our schools will be eligible for the vaccination. And so beginning next week, there'll be roughly 91,000 school employees who are vaccinated in that week 1. At this point, those schools have been notified. And one of the reasons Randy Lucas will talk a bit later is because literally in the last 2 weeks, we kind of landed on probably the best way to roll out that information was through our educational service centers. They are in very direct contact with school districts in their regions. And our school districts, by and large, are very familiar with getting information from their ESCs and their ESC superintendents. So that decision was made primarily for efficiency and effectiveness in communication. So that has worked really, really well by and large. Again, there are always exceptions, and there are probably 10 times the amount of questions oftentimes than we have answers for at a given moment. But as we have shifted to running all the information from the governor's office and anything from ODH and the Department of Education directly through the ESCs, we've seen that starting to really kind of clean itself up over the past few days. And so the ESCs are disseminating all the information. This is a very kind of employer-driven process in that from the outset, if a particular school or district already had a partner in place kind of ready to go, that has been and remains a choice that they can make to stay with that partner, or they can choose one that's been provided by the state. And in some cases, districts really didn't have a partner, or some of them do not at this point, and that will be provided by the state of Ohio, working through, again, the governor's office and the Department of Health at the state level. And the reason for that is they made sure they went through a bit of a vetting process so that any of these vaccine providers or partners for the school districts would have the capacity to deliver the amount of needed vaccines. So as I mentioned, 91,000 of those will begin next week. And then we anticipate by probably midday or so tomorrow, again, this is not coming from the Department of Education, but via the governor's office to us and then to the ESCs. But we think that by tonight and probably tomorrow, that everybody who is in weeks 2, 3, and 4 will know that at some point tomorrow. And then also we'll be able to lock down who all of those providers are for each and every school district as well, unless somebody out there is still saying we've kind of got our own and they haven't been identified. But we do, we very strongly think that by tomorrow, every district will know where they are in terms of the timing over the next 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And they'll know who their vaccine provider is. The other thing I would kind of mention, just as a school board member, if you have staff members who are still undecided, one thing that I think the governor used this in one of his press conferences was, kind of this train is coming through. And, if you don't hop on now, it may be a while till you're able to get back on it. There is a scarcity of the vaccine currently. And so there's not a promise. For example, if a staff member is just undecided and they don't sign up when their window happens to come to them over these next 4 weeks for that round 1, if they decide not to go then, but then 3 weeks later say, I'd really like to get in with this, there's no promise of that happening. So again, we will be communicating that pretty strongly to the ESC superintendents and in turn to the locals. But just again, as a school board member, if you have staff members, where nobody is forcing them, we would probably, I don't know that we would advise against that, but certainly from the state level, we are not requiring any individual to be vaccinated. If you're considering that as a local school district, our advice would be please work with your legal counsel along those lines and obviously honor any collective bargaining agreements or MOUs that you have in place. But from our end, we are not saying individuals are required to be vaccinated, just to be clear on that. And so as we sit right now, as I mentioned, every school district in the state by tomorrow should have their plan in place in terms of knowing who their partner is and also knowing what week they are going to receive their first dose of vaccinations. The toughest week at this point will be the second week. That's the week of February 8th, because and so I'll use Randy since he's going to be up next. If he has to communicate to, some of his school districts that they are in that week 2 group, they will have to very quickly get the counts of their staff who want to be vaccinated and back to through Randy and to the state information by end of business this coming Monday. And so that's going to be a really quick turnaround. Again, that's just so we have, not we in me, but as a state can turn over those vaccines and make sure they are ready to be delivered beginning February 8th for that week 2 group. So that's going to be the toughest group to turn around. We have a number of people identified who are making contact to our ESCs on a daily basis and keeping them informed, and they in turn will get that information out to the local districts. So I think with that, that's kind of the big view from the state level. And I'm not quite sure, Rick and Kathy and Mark, if we're going to stop for a few questions here, I think is the plan,
Yes,
before
sir.
we turn it over to Randy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Richard, for that presentation. We do have a few questions, and I want to address each of them just to make sure we cover the information, everyone's on the same page. Was there any type of understanding of how the first districts were chosen to receive the vaccine?
Well, so probably the easiest way to describe it is logistically. Again, the estimate of the total is between 300 and 350,000 vaccines or so. And so rolling out even 91,000 of them, it really comes down mostly to logistics in terms of what areas of the state we're kind of in a ready position. And so by that, not only school districts and kind of counties, but also then with the providers who are going to be providing the vaccine, and doing that in a way that we can, whatever is promised to that first group, we don't come in short. And at the same time, we don't have a whole lot of vaccine that's left over. So that's why those counts are so critical as well. But it really, more than anything, it's logistics and trying to balance that out is how they were chosen. So there wasn't any, nobody drew straws, or there wasn't preference given to one group or another, other than by and large the logistics of getting this out across the state.
And specifically to the staff and teachers that are within a district, there was a question if our special education teachers could get the vaccine first, but if I understood you correctly, the logistics and determinations of that is kind of decided on the district level internally.
It is, and I would say our advice has been work with the vaccine provider. We actually would probably, again, not recommend making that decision. Our superintendents, our board members, with very few exceptions, went to medical school, or this is their background. So we would rather let the healthcare experts make those types of decisions.
And we know even with the vaccinations coming out, life still happens, and there will be a need for substitutes and contractors that may come in contact with the students while they're still in the building. Has there been a discussion about how substitutes and contractors might have access to the vaccines, and if they even have to go through that process?
Right. I have not been privy to those conversations, so I can't really speak to that, other than, once we get past this, the people who are making school happen daily, then those subsequent groups, I don't know when those will roll out. I'm getting, and I'll cover this now because I'm getting a lot of these questions, for example, about daycares or preschools, even if they're located at a school. And the answer that we have been given is this first, 1B round is designed for K-12 employees, staff members who basically are important in the school functioning day to day. And so every time that question comes up, that is the same response we are given as well.
John, if I could follow up to that, the concept of substitutes, I know that came up in one of our other meetings, and I just want to make certain I didn't dispense bad advice here in the chat. I had mentioned that one of the things we had talked about, or I'd heard earlier anecdotally, that not necessarily casual subs, but those that were in multiple days a week, long-term subs, maybe the sub that's in a different building or a different district every day. Those could be treated differently, as they were more like a regular teacher.
Correct. Yeah. And that's why there are going to be a few areas like that where I think a local superintendent is going to have to make that determination as to who is pretty critical into the daily operations. And so if there's a substitute along those lines where they're in your school pretty often, you probably want that person to be vaccinated. Yeah. And again, I think that is it's close enough to an employee, a regular employee, that I don't think anybody would question that.
Thank you.
Also in the chat room, we've provided for our guests today the ODE web page that lists the schools that are included in week 1. And as we heard you say earlier, I think the determination between tonight and tomorrow in regards to weeks 2 through 4, correct?
Yes.
All right. And so, Dr. Richard, that actually covered the majority of the questions in our chat box. We thank you so much for your presentation today, and we welcome you to stay with us. Rick, did you have another?
Mark, forgive me if you already covered this. I've been texting back and forth with some individuals here in the chat room. Did you raise the question on the coaches that just came up?
Oh, I did not see that. Thank you, Rick.
Certainly.
Are outside coaches eligible to be included as far as the vaccination process?
Yeah, and any listing I've seen, again, along the lines, especially if they're in season, or, in other words, if they're not a teacher or an employee otherwise, but they are going to be coaching kids through this winter or spring, then it would only make sense to vaccinate them. We don't want them to be in direct contact with students, obviously, if they're uncomfortable doing so. So yeah, so they would be in line for the vaccinations as well. Good question.
And can we also assume that the second doses of vaccinations will be rolled out the same way that weeks 1 through 4 will be?
Yeah, and yeah, that is the game plan at this point. And again, I don't want to make a promise because I'm not the Department of Health, but our understanding now is it would roll out in the same order and using the same type of procedure.
So Mark, I have a question. So if I'm a district and my staff's not getting it till the 3rd week, and our goal is to get everybody back in, or at least a hybrid by March 1st, I'm obviously we're going to have districts rolling back these new schedules. And I can see parents saying, hey, wait a minute, why is the district across over here back in 100%? So I'm hoping that there's a big media push that explains to people that we can't vaccinate all of our staff at one time, and that it is going to be a rolling program. So you may have schools going back full time before you do, and that's just because the staff was not able to get vaccinated at the same time.
Right, and I think in those cases also that it's important to place emphasis on the hybrid option at that point, because you could begin that's really the intent. And I think the intent is to get kids back in school, and if they're not totally full-time March 1st, that you could start in very small segments, because that would qualify under the hybrid approach to that.
All right.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll mention, I will put my email information in here. If you have something that you think of late tonight, I do my best to answer emails within 24 hours, unless I get like hundreds of them. But I will put my email in there as well. Feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you for that, Dr. Richard. Rick, I think you had something else.
I was just going to share, unfortunately, Dr. Richard does need to leave before we'll conclude our meeting tonight. So if there are any last questions here, if not, he'll be I guess we'll have his email. So feel free to reach out directly. But I do want to say thank you, John, and we won't, I guess, have the chance to catch you formally at the end of the meeting. But thanks for your insight, taking time to be with us and fielding all these questions. And I'm certain the many more that are going to come your way.
Okay, thanks again for the opportunity, and I will stay on as long as I possibly can as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard. And as it was stated in Dr. Richard's presentation, the rollout of the vaccine is really the combination of efforts through our ESCs. And tonight we're excited to have Mr. Randy Lucas, who's a superintendent of the East Central ESC and also serves as the president of the Ohio ESC Association, who will give us more details about the boots on the ground, the frontline work that's happening across our state on behalf of the staff and the students going back into the building. So, Randy, thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you for the invitation. And just to reiterate what John said, I'm certainly not an expert. I don't know that anybody's an expert in how to manage a pandemic. So I guess my purpose for being here is, again, to represent the ESCs. I currently serve as superintendent at East Central Ohio ESC, and our main office is in New Philadelphia, and we serve Tuscarawas County and Belmont County, Guernsey County, Carroll, and Harrison. But as you mentioned, I'm also the president of OSBA, so I'm here actually representing all of the ESC superintendents. And just to say that as an ESC, we were definitely surprised when we were kind of pulled into this role initially. It came quickly, and actually the information was announced prior to ESCs being aware of that. But honestly, it does make sense, in my opinion, for ODH or ODE or the governor's office to try to coordinate this effort with, approximately 2,500 different entities. It can be very, very challenging in regards just to communication and consistency. So it makes sense to work with the ESCs. There are 51 of us, so it makes a whole lot of sense to try to coordinate that effort. And we've honestly already been doing a lot of this collaboration with our school district since the pandemic started in March. So we have been a main point of contact with our EMAs, our health departments, our county commissioners, the hospitals. We have had ongoing meetings with our superintendents weekly, if not daily. And our health commissioners have already been a large part of that process. We've had ongoing dialogue and meetings with them. A big part of those meetings has just been working through the details of this entire year of, dealing with these issues, especially when it comes to the guidelines in regards to quarantining. These guidelines have changed numerous times. It's created confusion for, our districts and our parents and our families. The impacts to athletics and extracurricular activities as these guidelines have been rolled out. We've had conversations with how to communicate best practices to our schools and to our families in regards to helping to prevent the spread of COVID. Communication strategies, FAQs, and then now, of course, with the vaccination being asked to be a part of that. So essentially our charge, we are not decision makers in this process, but our charge is basically to reach out to all of the educational entities within our ESC region. That would be public, non-public, private, parochial. Every entity that is out there is essentially being assigned to one of the 51 ESCs. So we were provided with a spreadsheet that listed every one of the school entities within our region. And we were asked to, in a very quick fashion, reach out to them and collect information in regards to how many staff members they have, how many staff members they anticipated wanted to receive the vaccine, if they already had a provider, a partner for that vaccination, and if they wanted to continue to use that partner, if they felt like things were already kind of put together and in place and they already had plans for that, or if they didn't, would they like to use one of the retail providers that would be available to them in the area? And if so, would they like assistance from the state in coordinating that communication or that link to the partner to set up schedules and provide that communication and that information? So that's what we have been charged to do. All of the ESCs, I would say, have stepped up and done what has been requested. We've reached out again in very short fashion to try and collect all of that information. I know some ESCs are still working with some of those educational entities and trying to get information back. I know, for instance, I had about 40 different educational entities on my list. We're down to, I think, 4 or 5 now that we're still reaching out to on a daily basis, making telephone calls, emails, saying, please, we want you to have a link to a partner. Please, provide that information to us so we can submit it to the state. And then, of course, they're using that information to determine how many doses of vaccines will be needed and to where the vaccines need to be sent to what partner. So obviously our ESCs I agree, it makes a whole lot of sense to utilize us and work in that fashion just because, as was mentioned, we do have boots on the ground. We have a lot of these relationships already built. The strategy and communication efforts have already been ongoing, and our ESCs have already been working to get that information as requested, submitted to the state. And I guess I would say just above and beyond that, our ESCs have done more than what's been requested. So I know, for example, in our ESC, we met with our state senator, a county commissioner, the health department commissioner, And we put together a podcast to try to get information out to our communities and our families regarding the importance of getting vaccinated, just to give them an opportunity to understand some of the challenges that our school districts have been dealing with, because the goal, again, is to get our kids back in school. That's our number one charge. And the majority of our school districts have been in school since day one. However, just due to the many challenges of this pandemic, it's been inconsistent. There's been a lack of continuity. It's changed from week to week. Our school districts are trying to stay in session, but just due to lack of bus drivers, lack of staff members, supervision, all of the different nuances of trying to keep the school open on a week-to-week basis, it really has changed. And part of what we've been asked to do by ODE is every week we coordinate with our school districts and what is their instructional model of delivery this week. Is it a 5-day face-to-face model? Is it a hybrid? Or is it 100% remote? And the majority of our districts have changed back and forth all year long, just based on, again, the complexities of what they're dealing with and staffing. So we tried to communicate through this podcast how important it is to get our kids back in school. This vaccine, we view this as the game changer. That's what's going to create that consistency, again, to, hopefully get our kids back every day. It's been a huge impact, not only on just our school personnel, but our families, their work schedules, work routines, babysitting, the stress and the mental health of our students, our families, our staff members. It's been a major concern. So our ESCs have been trying to assist our school districts with that as well. We put together some wellness initiatives. Our ESC has been involved with food preparation and food distribution. So there's been a lot of effort and activity going on already, but we just think this is the key component to getting somewhat of a normalcy back to our school system. So it makes sense for us to be involved. And other things that have been happening above and beyond just collecting the information and communicating it back to the state, grant opportunities. We've worked with one of our county health departments to obtain a grant for our school districts to assist with the contact tracing. That's a big amount of work that was thrown onto our schools, just because some of our local health departments did not have the capacity to do all of that contact tracing within the school. So we helped assist with getting a grant to help them offset some of those expenses, or add some additional nursing help and support. And so we're also working on a round 2 grant to help with not only contact tracing, but with vaccination support as well. What we're hearing from our health departments is that it can be quite extensive in regards to making sure that there's supervision, working out schedules, contacting families, making sure that we're aware of who came in for the first administration, so you can follow up with them, whether it's 28 days later or 21 days later, whatever that time frame is, depending on what vaccine is used. So there's a whole lot of logistics that go into the vaccination process. So we are also assisting our school districts with that as well. I did reach out just to some of my colleagues to get some additional information from them in regards to what they're doing. So I'll just review some of those with everybody quickly. But one of the ESCs commented that they are assisting with the vaccination of 17,000 school employees. That's already set up, and it's going to occur over a 5-day period. They are conducting walkthroughs and reviews of the actual vaccination sites. And they just feel like they have the logistical and operational experience and expertise and capacity within the ESC to assist some of these retail providers with the planning and the scheduling and the implementation of these mass vaccination clinics, especially when it comes to IT support, maintenance support, coordination of EMS staff, potentially some special duty police officers, traffic control. In our large areas, there's definitely a belief that that support will be needed. Another one of our ESCs, they've worked in the past with the EMA on mass distribution in the fall, and they're going to leverage that current relationship to assist them with their partner Kroger. And they already have a plan right now to vaccinate 4,600 teachers over 3 days, which is right now scheduled to occur next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Another one of the ESCs discussed that they currently have all of their scheduling done, and they're currently booked for next week. And they would say that the best thing about this process was the fact that it did streamline the entire process, and they had all of their information submitted within 24 hours of the request. This particular ESC, they've asked to be the point of contact for one of the retail providers, which happens to be Kroger. They were involved with assigning each one of the school districts that have chosen to use Kroger to a pod based on numbers and location. They have secured pod locations. They're communicating with the pod host staff, and they are also assisting with providing breakfast and lunch for the Kroger and pod staff who are going to be working to administer those vaccinations. They're communicating with the EMA daily, and they are answering all questions from the districts in regards to this process. We've got another ESC that actually they're working with a private entity that school districts contract for services in regards to SLPs, PTs, OTs. And so even though they're not direct employees from the school district, they are contracted and they are there on a day-to-day basis. So they are that main point of contact with those outside private entities and making sure that they are included somewhere in the schedule of vaccinations. And other districts is they've been hosting informational meetings as well as developing a plan with their area partner, which also happens to be Kroger. And they are creating a schedule for vaccinations for over 7,000 school employees in the area. And that also includes them reviewing the sites that will be in operation and working with the site coordinators at each one of the vaccination clinics. And then I guess one of the last comments that I will share that was provided to me, it says our county has been meeting since March at 8:30 every Friday with the health department commissioner, our 3 state reps, our state senator, and our superintendents facilitated by the ESC. Whenever there is an update by any stakeholder is shared by the large group. We were able to deliver masks to all of our agencies multiple times, and I've done everything from create letters for our families to having a common voice when a case occurred in schools to creating plans to open safely. The majority of our schools have been in person since day one, and they are still going strong. All of us have shared our cell phone numbers with our health commissioners included. We all take calls at any time. And finally, we are ready for vaccine distribution at 5 locations in our county. When we have the green light, we will be ready. I'm not sure you could find a better example of collaboration in the state. So I guess I just share that to say there is a whole lot of collaboration and communication. I'm not gonna lie, there's been frustration and confusion as well. I mean, that's just part of the process. And again, I don't think anybody is an expert on how to deal with a pandemic. So we're all doing the best that we can. But I do think it does make sense, as I've mentioned several times, for the ESCs to be the point. Just to clarify, we are not the decision makers, and we get a lot of questions oftentimes about can we include whether it's volunteers that come into the building or higher ed folks, and we don't make those decisions. We are simply the conveners, the collaborators, and the facilitators of the information, and we're trying to do a whole lot of help and assistance in regards to organizing and just providing that information back to whether it's the state and our school districts, and just solving problems and answering questions for them as they arise.
All right, thank you, Randy. That was excellent, and a big shout out, because I don't think that people really do understand how much behind the curtain work has been done. So we definitely appreciate the ESC's support in this process. One of the things that's buzzing in the chat room is, and John and Randy, I'm going to throw this question to both of you. People really want to know, how were districts chosen to get the vaccinations first? We have people who believe, hey, listen, we've been in full time, we should be at the front of the line. There's questions about, are you doing it by county? So you're kind of chunking, so people that are in proximity are getting the vaccination. Can you speak to how that roster was built and why people are maybe be in the first week and maybe why I'm in the 4th week?
Yeah, I kind of, I'll take that. I hit on this before, but it really came down more to logistics than anything else. And even with that said, we are not directly a decision maker in this because, I'm not the one dealing with the vaccines. And so there's really not, because we started getting that from all over the state. Like, we've been in full-time, can we be prioritized? And so we did pass that information on. And ultimately, I think as much as that was somewhat of a desire in places, I think it was more about where the partners could roll in and where the schools were, where the counties were, just like school districts, departments of health across the state, have lesser or greater capacity. And so all of those things went into it, but that's about as much as I can speak to it, because at the end of the day, neither Randy or myself are that's just not our business. So we've been, trying to take that and disseminating the information we do know. But when we've asked it, because we've both received that question quite a bit, it's been about how this could be rolled out. And, there wasn't really picking anybody on criteria. The criteria was really about how it could logistically work and get the vaccines, distributed across the state.
Well, we appreciate that, because we are going to have communities, of course, call our board members to say,
Yes.
why aren't we in that first week? Is it because you guys decided whatever it is? So I appreciate that messaging. And once again, to our members, if you need them to write that out or to give those highlights to you, make sure you get that, because you are going to get pushed on that, because everybody wants to be on the front of the line. So I think that we've answered, everybody's doing a really great job in that chat box. I hope everybody has access to that, really addressing some of the questions. I do want to move on to our legal section, but I will keep my eye on the chat. Dr. Richard, I think you're leaving us because you have somewhere else to go. We want to make sure that we tell you how much we appreciate you. I do see your information in our chat box. Looks like you have an open invitation to everybody that if they have questions or concerns, they can reach out to you. So thank you again for joining us. Once again, I will monitor the chat, but I am going to, if no one, where's Mr. Lewis or Mr. Bobo, looks like they're good. I'm going to throw it over to now our OSBA staff attorney, Ralph Lusher, because we know there's all kinds of legal questions around the process and the topic of vaccinating our staff. So Mr. Lusher, you're up.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And thanks for everybody for being here today. I was actually just going to start with just the background so everybody understands the basis of how, who can mandate, who can't. So in 1905, there was actually a case, a Supreme Court of the United States case called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And in that case, Mr. Jacobson did not want to be vaccinated for smallpox. There was a $5 fine for that, and he refused. It eventually made it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in the 7-2 decision decided that states do have it within their power to ensure the health and safety of their citizens. And so states can mandate vaccinations. Then take that further, in 1922, a case called Zuck v. King, it was determined that school districts could not allow students that were unvaccinated to come into their districts. Again, that was a Supreme Court case, so it's throughout the entire United States. We really haven't had much of the way of vaccine cases since then. So those are our two main cases, even though they're really old case law that still hold to today. So with that being said, then it comes down to, and I'm going to explain employers in private and public at the same time, and then I'm going to break it down into just public. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission does state that employers can mandate vaccines, but of course they have to watch out for ADA and Title VII issues. So if anybody has a religious or a medical reason, they would not have to get the vaccine if it would harm them in some way. There's also reasonable accommodations that go with both of those. However, now we're going to break into the public. For the public sector, you now have your collective bargaining agreements. And actually, Mr. Richard mentioned this as well, that you're going to have to negotiate this with your union, because although we don't have a CERB or a court case that states specifically, for the most part, we couldn't see how this mandating vaccines would not be considered a term and condition of employment. So it would have to be negotiated in your CBA. Now with that, the ADA and Title VII would still be exemptions for the vaccine as well. So in a roundabout a roundabout way, what we're saying is actually encouraging vaccines, and that's what Mr. Richards was saying, is probably the best bet to avoid a whole lot of human resources and negotiation hassle. That's really where we are with the vaccine discussion at this point legally, unless there's very specific questions that anybody has that we would be happy to answer.
So can I mandate that my staff take the vaccination before they return to the classroom?
If you can agree with the union in your collective bargaining agreement, the answer is yes.
Okay.
But like we said, that is a process. You're going to probably have to give something up to get that. And once again, the people that don't want to get it anyways still have a route to an exception through the ADA and Title VII.
We have to know that there are going to be staff that says, no, I'm not taking that vaccination. So I want to make sure that our guests have resources that if they have a staff member who says, I'm not taking this, they can go somewhere to say, okay, what do we do next?
Right. Yeah. So again, there is the difference, private employers, because they can, you're at will, they can fire them if they don't, concede to the terms and conditions, where that's not the case with, unions. You have to agree to those collectively.
Okay.
So in this scenario, yes, it's possible to mandate, but you're going to have to go through your union. And then you can work from there with your union on how you want to go about that.
So Ralph, if I'm in a district and we do not have a union, can I mandate that they take it in order to return to work?
Yeah, if you don't have a collective bargaining, if you don't have a union, so even though I was referencing private and public, but really the reference is union to private. If you don't have a union involved, I don't know which district you're talking about where the teachers don't have a union, but you can mandate as a term and condition of employment.
Okay. I appreciate you allowing me to push on you, because I know that there's some people that have some questions about this. Sarah's put in some guidance that Ralph mentioned, so that is available in our chat.
Yeah, and also actually we do have a podcast on OSBA's website. I actually did back in December on this very topic as well.
Okay, great. ESCs don't have unions. That was a reply in the box. And then there's the podcast is available right there. The link is. Sarah, did you have anything to add before we?
I would say for the districts that are sort of contemplating going to the route of mandating or thinking about mandating policies, that I know John mentioned this at the beginning during his section, but that is definitely a decision you want to make in consultation with your board council. There are some, as Ralph mentioned, some HR and potential CBA collective bargaining agreement. Even if you're in a district that doesn't have a collective bargaining agreement, there are going to be potential legal implications or some practical things that you're going to need to work through. And so those are conversations that are going to be dependent on your independent policies in your district and obviously any collective bargaining agreements, as Ralph mentioned. So make sure that you're reaching out to your legal counsel to have that conversation.
Very good. Ralph, is that good?
That's everything right now. Unfortunately, we don't have much in the way of case law to expound upon anything. Yeah. I'm certain that we're going to in the future after we run through this round of vaccinations.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it looks like we're about to tie everything up here. If you have any last questions, and remember, just because our town hall is over doesn't mean that we're not accessible to you. So as you think of questions or comments or thoughts, we are available, and all of our guests and experts have provided their information. So there's some questions, and I don't know if anyone on this call is going to be able to answer this, but if the vaccination, if my district's week is up and we're there to get our vaccination, but 2 of my staff have COVID, are they able to get that vaccination after our window of time that's open? I'm not sure if anyone on here can answer that. My guess is they're going to hold that and be able to, and then that staff member will be able to take it once they've passed outside of that COVID window. But I don't think we have any medical experts on here. We got a lot of people with fancy titles, but I don't think we have any doctors.
Kathy, I heard John say, and I know he hopped off, but there was he made a comment about the fact that if you don't get it when your sort of window opens, but you wait 3 weeks and then come back, that it wasn't a guarantee that they would get the vaccine. I don't know if it makes a difference if your reason for not getting it initially is because you were in quarantine but he did mention that on the call. So I'm not sure if Randy, you know that piece or not, but
Well, I guess I would just say, if you're talking about a large group, it's going to be easy to say, well, if you missed your window and you've got 50 or 100 staff members, you're probably going to get really kicked to the end of the line. If we're talking about 2 or 3 staff members that just because of having COVID, they couldn't take it when that first administration was done, I would assume most of us have a strong enough relationship with our local health departments that we could make a phone call and say, this is the reason why they were not able to, get that vaccination during that first round when it was scheduled. But they're now ready, and we want to make sure that, they receive that we could probably work something out to take care of those unique individual circumstances. That would be my opinion.
I think one of the things that superintendents, of course, are starting to think of right now is, okay, if Tuesday and Wednesday are our vaccination days, that means my staff's going to be out of the classroom or out of remote learning. So I have to make sure that I'm thinking forward to making sure that my students don't expect that their English teacher is going to show up at 10 a.m. on a Zoom because they're probably down getting their vaccination. So those are things that once everybody gets their date and their window of time, they're going to have to start to organize what those school days look like.
That's true. That's a lot of what's happening right now. And there's even been some conversation about what will the side effects be, and do you want to have your entire staff receive the vaccination if those side effects are going to be so severe that you're going to end up missing, a bunch of your staff members are going to be absent or missing the next day. Right now, what we're being told is that side effects seem to be pretty minimal. It appears that round 2 may be worse than round 1 in regards to side effects, but we've already had some conversations about, districts that are close together. Does it make sense to do half and half and half and half? That way, you're not having an entire staff maybe that gets it all at the same time. So those are all, things to consider when districts are working with their partner provider.
For sure. Mr. Bobo, I think we're coming to the end of our time together. We've had some really, really great information, a lot of information to process. I want to make sure that our guests know that we are available. Call us at OSBA, come to our website, and if we don't have the answer, we will make sure that we put you in touch with someone that does. Mr. Bobo?
Yeah, this was a great informational session, and makes me very hopeful. If the vaccines are going out within the next 4 weeks to our districts, that we're getting closer and closer to bringing our students back into the building in a very safe manner. So
yeah, our next conversation will be graduation and prom.
Right.
Real stuff, real
right.
work.
So again, we do want to thank Dr. Richard and Randy Lucas and Ralph Lusher and each of you today for being with us here today. We do want to remind you that OSBA has made the commitment to continue to update our website. Specifically, we have a specific site has our COVID-19 resources that are updated daily in regards to information to make sure that you have up-to-date information and resources regarding how best to take care of our children in our schools. So I welcome you to go to go to houseschoolboards.org, check out the COVID-19 website page, make sure you get the information, and we will be following up always to make sure that we keep it up to date.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Stay safe, and we are here to support you in any way that you need. Good night.
Thank you all.